am back with a new video this week. I don't know what's going on with this colour. I don't know if I like it. So in this week's video, we are talking about the co-ed killer, also known as Edmund Kemper. Edmund was born in Burbank, California on December 18th, 1948 to his parents Edward Kemper Jr. and Clarnell Stage. He was described as being a very bright child. He excelled in school, but he had extremely bad psychopathic and violent outbreaks. In 1957, he moved to Montana with his mother and his two sisters after their parents divorced. Clarnell, his mother, was an alcoholic, and she often blamed Edmund for all of her problems and just really treated him a lot differently to his sisters. When he was just 10 years old, she forced him to live in the basement because she feared that he would hurt or rape his sisters. Now, Edmund had really troubling signs at a very early age. He would have dark fantasies, and he would often cut off the heads of his sisters' Barbie dolls, and even sometimes coercing the girls to play a game with him that he made up called Gas Chamber, where he would have the girls blindfold him and lead him to a chair, tie him up, and where he would just pretend to writhe in agony, basically like throwing his body around and twitching and shaking and screaming until he was dead. And in some interviews, he would even say that they'd play games where they'd roll each other up in rugs, or like big heavy rugs, and then it was the goal of the game to squirm out of these rugs before they suffocated. The next thing he started doing was he started to kill the family cats. Now, this is a very common thing with serial killers, or that kids that become killers, is that they start with killing animals before they move on to humans. So the first cat, he buried it alive, and then he dug it back up and then buried it again. But the second cat, at just 13 years old, he stabbed the cat to death and hid it in his closet for his mother to find. Now, after this, I've read a few different articles, one saying that he ran away to his father's and the other one saying that his mother sent him to his father's. So either way, he went to his father's and his father sent him to live with the grandparents. And they lived on a farm in North Fork, California. Now, Edmund hated living with his grandparents, and he began to take an interest in learning as much as he could, and this was about guns. He had a fascination with guns before he went to live with them, but this kind of just like being on a farm around a lot of guns, he got even more interested in them and started using them and learning a lot about them. But after killing several birds and smaller animals, his grandparents took the rifle away from him. On August 27th, 1964, Edmund and his grandmother were sitting in the kitchen at the table, and they were having a bit of a discussion. I couldn't find what they were talking about, but something happened and an argument broke out, and she threw something at him and it made him angry, so he retaliated. At 15 years old, standing at 6.5 foot, he shot his grandmother in the head with a .22 caliber rifle. He then proceeded outside, where he saw his grandfather walking up the driveway, who had just come back from shopping, and he killed him. And then he hid the body. After this, he went back inside and he called his mother and asked her what he should do, and that he didn't know what to do. She had told him to turn himself into police, told him exactly what happened and how it happened. So Edmund turned himself into the police. He told police that he shot his grandmother because he wanted to feel what it felt like, and that he shot his grandfather so he wouldn't have to find out that his wife was murdered. He was then sent to, now I'm going to read this because I can't really say the name properly, so I'm going to try and pronounce it out and I'll put it on the screen. But he was sent to Alascadero State Hospital, where he stayed in the criminally insane unit. This is where they found out that he had the IQ of 145, which is basically a genius. I'll try and find the chart and I'll put the chart on screen. But while doing all these testings, they also discovered that he suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. On Edmund's 21st birthday in 1969, he was released into the care of his mother, despite his prison doctors telling them that this was a bad idea and that he shouldn't be put with his mother because of her past abuse and just her psychological issues in general. Now they were living in Santa Cruz, California, and Edmund started attending community college, where I'm pretty sure his mother worked at. There was a few things where it said he went to community college and she worked at a college, and then other places where she worked at a college and he attended that college. So I'm not 100% sure if it's the same college or whether that really matters, but yeah, just so you know. And while at college, he worked a few different jobs until he finally got employed with the Department of Transportation in 1971. During this time, Edmund applied to become a state trooper, but he was rejected due to his size. Because at the time, he weighed 300 pounds or 135 kilos and was 6 foot 9 inches tall. That is huge. As you can see with these photos, he's extremely tall. If you look at him compared to the door frame and look at him compared to the size of the stool that he's sitting on next to the bed and next to the other men that he's walking next to, he is very, very tall. So at the time, he hung around some police officers and they were pretty good friends, and their nickname for him was Big Ed. The same year, he began working for the highway department, but he was in a car accident where a car hit his bike and his arm was severely injured. In a civil suit, he filed against the driver of the car and got a settlement of $15,000. So while Edmund was out of work, he had to find other things to do. So he noticed around the area there was a large number of females hitchhiking. So with the settlement money, Edmund went and bought a new car and he filled it with tools that he thought he might need to fulfill his murderous desires. It started out sort of like innocent, I guess you could say in the beginning. He would pick the girls up. He would either drop them off where they were going or drop them off in between. But it was in the beginning just him picking them up and dropping them off. And he said in a few interviews that he used this as like a little game sort of thing. So each time he would try to have conversations with them to try and work out what made them get in the car with him, because girls, girls in general are very, don't really want to get into a car with a male. Like, what makes them get into a car trustingly sort of thing. So he said that he found out that instead of being like, oh, there's girls, go and pick them up, he would just kind of like take his time, plotter along, pretend to check his watch, to be like, oh, do I have enough time? Check his mirror, be like, oh, I don't know. And then the girls would see him, be like, oh, he looks like a geeky guy, whatever, let's catch a ride with him. And he said each time he tried to not kill them, he tried to figure out what made them get into the car with him and what worked, sort of thing. And if you go and watch interviews with him, a lot of the times when he's describing picking up these hitchhiking girls, it's all a game. Like, everything's a game. He thought they were playing a game with him. Like, he really refers back to that a lot. But I don't know, I feel like that he's got a point of something, like trying to work it all out. I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but I will link interviews down below where he kind of refers to everything as a game. It was a game. It was a game. And then again, when his sisters were little and they used to play games, like, yeah, that's a normal kid thing, but they didn't play normal kid games, if that kind of makes sense. Okay, so I'm going to read these names again because I can't pronounce them very well off the top of my head, probably even if I read them. But one day, he picked up Mary Ann Hez and Anita Luchessa, which were two students from Fresno State. Edmund took them to a wooded area, apparently to rape them, but panicked and stabbed and choked them to death instead. He then shoved their bodies into the trunk or the boot and drove off to his house in Alameda. On the drive back to his house, though, he was stopped by a police officer for a broken tail light, but the officer obviously didn't search the car. Once he got home, he raped the bodies and then he dismembered them. He placed different parts of the body into plastic bags and then he dumped them in a ravine at Lamona Prieta Mountain. Sorry if I butchered that. Later that year, on September the 14th, 1972, Edmund picked up a 15-year-old Aiko Ku who was hitchhiking instead of waiting for her bus to come so she could go to her dance class. Unfortunately, she met the same fate as Mary and Anita. Early 1973, Edmund was struggling with money, so he moved back in with his mother. He continued to act on his murder impulses, and he picked up Cindy Schell and he shot and killed her. While his mother was out, he hid Cindy's body in his room. The following day, while his mother was at work, he dismembered Cindy's body and he buried her head in the garden looking up to his mother's room, saying that she always said she wanted people to look up to her. And then he threw the rest of the body parts in the ocean. On February the 5th, 1973, Edmund had used a college parking sticker that his mother had given him to commit a double murder. He drove to the uni and he offered two girls a lift. The girls were Rosalind Thorpe and Alice Liv. Now, he did say in some interviews that the reason he was drawn to these girls is because they looked exactly like Mary and Anita. One had blonde hair and one had dark hair. And I've heard a couple of different stories with this one. One story is that he got them in the car and he shot them in the car. And then he drove with them. And the other story was that he just wanted to take them, like he wanted to try and resist the urge to kill them. So he got them in the car and they got to, I think it was like a freeway that went up one way and a freeway that went down another way. And they wanted to go down and under, which led to where he'd killed Mary and Anita. A wooded area along that way apparently, and the other way was just a longer way to where they were going, and he wanted to go the longer way and not take them that way because he said that he knew if he went that way he would end up killing them and he didn't want to. So he took that way and then they started freaking out, and then something happened and then he just decided to do it anyway, and then he realized he couldn't resist the urge or something like that. But they're the two different scenarios of this story that I've heard. Then he at some point dismembered their bodies and he put their body parts in different locations. In March, some of the girls' remains were found by hikers in San Mateo County, and around this time there was also two other serial killers that were committing their crimes in this area, obviously that they hadn't caught yet, I'm pretty sure, and that gave this town the name of murder capital of the world. And this is how Edmund also got his nickname, the co-ed killer or the co-ed butcher. In April 20th, 1973, Edmund bludgeoned his mother to death with a heavy claw hammer. He then cut her throat and removed her tongue and her voice box and disposed of it in the garbage disposal. Now, this part is pretty gross, so skip forward like 30-40 seconds. He then decapitated her and raped her severed head, and after he was done, he placed her head on a shelf and he used it as a dartboard. Edmund then called his mother's friend Sally Hallett and invited her over. When she arrived, Edmund strangled her and then hid her body in the closet. The next day, Edmund left and he drove east until he hit Colorado. On April 23, 1973, he called Santa Cruz police and confessed his crimes. At first, they did not believe him because if you remember, he hung out with police officers and the police officers at Santa Cruz were his friends, and they didn't believe that their Big Ed could do this. So he led them to all the evidence, which convinced them and proved that he was the co-ed killer. He was arrested and charged with 8 counts of first-degree murder. In October 1973, Edmund went on trial for his crimes and he was found guilty of all charges. When the judge asked Edmund what his punishment should be, he replied that he should be tortured to death. Instead, he received 8 consecutive life sentences, but I've also heard that it was 7 consecutive life sentences. So either or. On several occasions, he has asked for the death penalty and been refused. And he's also tried suicide twice and failed. He currently resides in California Medical Facility, and apparently he is a model prisoner, and he organizes the scheduling of appointments for other inmates, psychiatrists, and he also narrates books onto tape for the blind. And that's all I have for this one. He's still alive as of now. I'm pretty sure he's like 70... I'm not good with math. I think he's like 73 or 74 now. He apparently, I'm not 100% sure on this, but while in there, he's very close to a lot of inmates, including Charles Manson up until last year, and another guy, I can't remember his name. I think his name's Herbert, but his nickname's Herbie. So yeah, this one's a pretty... yeah, I don't know. I found this case really interesting to like research and everything. It makes you think it doesn't matter how smart you are, you can still get into a lot of trouble, because this man was very, very smart, very intelligent, but he could have got away with it, but he chose to turn himself in it. And I'm not saying he's a good guy at all, like he's not. And I will link some of the interviews he's done and things like that down below, and I'm pretty sure, I haven't watched it myself, but there's like a episode or a segment on Mind Hunters with him in it. I want to watch it. If you've watched it, let me know down in the comments below what you thought of it. But yes, I hope you guys really enjoyed this week's video. I try to post every single Wednesday. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit that bell so you know when I post next, in case I post late again. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys.